Call this meeting to order. Since we're all here, I don't have to go through the remote rigmarole of a roll call and everything. Our first agenda item is public comment. We don't seem to have any members of the public here in the room or on Zoom to make comments, but we always want to have a spot on our agenda for the public to offer us their comments. Next agenda item is action item list updates. I know, Brian, you emailed out the copy of the action item list with all the comments from Skip and from Andy, the most recent comments we've received, I think, and that's all in there.
Yep.
Anything else to update on that list?
No, I don't think so. And I don't recall seeing anything. We haven't received any other stakeholder responses in the last week or so.
No, not that I've seen.
And I think, Andy, I appreciate the comments you sent, and those are in. So in the action items list, in terms of types of feedback, I put those in as committee member. I think similar to some feedback we got from an individual member of the finance committee. I think we'll reserve the select board response until you guys have had a chance to chat together.
Yeah.
And I think Colleen mentioned at this past week's meeting that I think that's on the agenda for early December.
Right. I think the select board's next meeting is first week of December. And,
correct. Yep.
And Colleen did indicate that that there's a spot on the agenda for the select board members to collectively provide their comments back to us.
Yeah, it was a full agenda last week, and we wanted to make sure that we gave time, with the missed meeting, we wanted to make sure we gave time and efficient time for all this, so. Yep,
So,
you guys are our first priority.
all your board members are sufficiently forewarned that their opinions are going to be asked for.
Yeah, don't, don't look at me if they don't bring their homework.
No, you've done your part, we've done our part. All we can do is, what was that? What is that thing about the horse in the water? That's about
You
where
can
we're.
lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
You can lead, you can ask the boards for their feedback, but you can't make them reply. Yeah. So I guess our major topic for tonight was to find some work for us to do to actually begin preparing updates for the bylaws. And to that end, Brian has, in your email, Brian, you identified bylaw articles for which we've received all the stakeholder feedback we asked for.
Yep. Yeah, and then I tacked on to the bottom. We've had a few stakeholders chime in with ideas for new bylaws. I figured those would probably be right for us to dive into at any point in time too.
Yep.
And so the only other note, and it's in the email, but we did call out the select board as a party we wanted some feedback from on the use of Lake Ripple article. So I'd probably say that, holding off on reviewing the use of Silver Lake with the use of Lake Ripple, especially since the recreation director's feedback basically sought to bring those two into alignment for the most part.
Right.
So we should probably review both of those in tandem. But the other 10 on this list should be right for us to dive into at any point.
No, based on their feedback and even when the thought kind of crossed my mind when I was looking through other bylaws.
Yeah.
Those two really should be, they kind of go together and they should be aligned
there.
And we can work with the additional stakeholders and once we get all the feedback on those we can look at working with the stakeholders to bring those two into whatever alignment needs to be done. I think the only major difference between those two water bodies is Silver Lake, we have the swimming beach, and Lake Ripple we don't. But other than that, they're they should be largely similar in terms of how we regulate their use.
Mother Nature regulates the use of Lake Ripple pretty much, the weeds.
Yes. So how would you, how shall we proceed with this? Do we want to, we've got these sort of list of candidate articles. Do we want to have, sort of pick the ones we want to start working on, and then somebody volunteers to take each one, or how do you want to work that? I mean, ultimately, it's going to be a committee work product, but at least to draft some initial proposal for amendments to a given article, it probably makes most sense for one person to take that on.
Well, I'll do this. Being the doctor, I'll work on the sex change operation of the bylaws. I go through and just, work on rewriting the couple of because it's not terribly, it's not gonna be terribly difficult. I don't think, to take the swarmy former language out of it and make it more direct and to the point.
Okay, so
Eliminate that.
I hear Skip volunteering to
Take
on the issue of gendered language in the bylaws. And I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. I am currently working on boards and committees and appointments. We've discussed this repeatedly. We've got the issue of a list of boards and committees that appears in the charter, and much the same list, although not identical, appears in Article 1, Section 9 of the bylaws. Both of those lists are out of date. Based on my discussion with the town council, we can be comfortable ignoring what Section 8 or Article 8 of the charter says, because that was intended as a transitional provision. Basically, the charter said, when we passed the charter back in '87, part of it was, here's a list of board and committee appointments and officer appointments that we'll use it for now until the bylaw gets updated. The bylaw was updated back in '88 or so to take care of that, so that council seemed to say that we can safely ignore that part of the charter. Consider that really not part of the charter anymore, because its whole intent was just to make the transition with the new charter, the transitional provisions, until bylaws are updated.
Just thinking ahead of the game is, when you put together your list, just be prepared to say, okay, the reason why we don't need this is because this was all intended to be a bridge. But by the way, for all of those that want to stay with this, here's where all of these things now go by either statute or something else. So it doesn't matter what it says here.
Yeah, so this is what I've been working on, is taking the collection of all boards and committees that we have, however defined. And first of all, there's going to be a subset of those, industrial development financing as an example. That's long dead. Yeah, that was a thing back in the 80s and 90s, but there's no reason to, because it no longer exists. So that's gone. But so I'm going through the list. I'm going to prune out things that simply don't exist anymore. I'm mostly done. I was working on it this afternoon for a while, compiling a list of this board or committee is mentioned, it's mentioned in state law. Basically, state law says you have this. So there's that. There's those that are specifically mentioned, called out in the charter. Like the charter creates the board of the select board and the school committee, that kind of thing. There's others that there's a specific bylaw article that creates them, like the Community Preservation Committee. there's a few boards and committees that were created by a town meeting vote. So I'm sort of gathering that all together. Some of them appear in more than one place, and I'm trying to reconcile all that with the goal of ending up with a list of these are the boards and committees that the bylaw needs to talk about specifically. And that's all. I don't want the bylaw to be talking about boards and committees that don't need to be defined in the bylaw mentioned. So I'm working on that. I've been making some progress on that, but you know, there's one old town meeting vote from '86 I have to go look up. That I found a reference to it, but I have to go get, I don't have a copy of the town meeting minutes from '86. I have on my shelf at home, I have the town reports from 1987 through 2021.
Yes.
And one of those, 1992, doesn't have all of the town meeting minutes in it. It's missing the minutes of a town meeting, but all the rest of them, I've got copies of town meeting minutes for everything, but I've got to go back to in 1986 for a couple of reasons for this. And there's also some other land use things related to the Open Space and Rec Committee that I also have to review the '86 town meeting minutes. Well, there's a couple of earlier years too. I have to go back and dig up. And there's one from 1957 relative to boards and committees that I have to look up. There's a town meeting vote there in 1957 regarding a forest committee, which we no longer have, although technically I think we're still supposed to have it. So we'll try to work out some of that deal. But yeah, but by and large, I'm trying to figure out, trying to get a sense of which boards and committees the bylaw needs to talk about, and everything else. I think there's that Article 1, Section 9 that talks about appointments made by the select board and the town administrator. I want to sort of refine that to say not to itemize everything that's in there now, but to try to find some more generic way of discussing that only to the extent that it needs to be discussed. So I'm working on that, which is not one of these, in this list of things, but it is something that I've been working on and plan to continue.
Yeah, I think both of those probably span a number of articles. I think one of the articles that we had teed up as right for someone to dive into, although I don't think there's probably much to do with it, is the CPC article. We heard back from CPC. They didn't have any changes. They would like to be kept abreast of any changes that do get proposed. But outside of some cleanup and notes that Dave, you and Greg, and I think Skip, you had a comment too, had, that one could be right to dive into. So that would fall under the committee kind of umbrella. But
yeah, that's probably one of those that there's not much work that we're going to do, but yeah, everything we can check off that. Yeah, maybe we'll find some bylaw articles that we can chalk off as saying this doesn't require any change, or it's cosmetic change. It's completely non-substantive. So anything we can check off in that manner, and we'll have to we've talked about this off and on. How do we deal with the essentially the cosmetic changes?
We can always wait till the early December meeting, and then when they come back and we identify the perhaps one or two bylaws that don't have any comments, we can throw those into it. Do you remember whether there was a standing bylaw committee at some point in time? I get the feeling there was, and to prevent stuff that's happened over time with this, it would be nice to see one.
Yeah,
just to review.
Right. I don't remember us ever having kind of a standing bylaw committee, but it's, as we've discussed repeatedly during our meetings, it's an idea that's worth at least considering, whether that's something that we end up encoding into the bylaw or recommending to the select board that they do that. We might want to have some discussion with the select board about or and maybe the town administrator, that how best to approach that, but it wouldn't, it seems like it might be a good idea to have, sort of someone who reviews proposed bylaws or proposed bylaw changes for kind of, overall consistency with bylaws. I don't know.
Yeah. I kind of got interested in this whole project when we did the charter. And we weren't kind of going much off the 3 or 4 things that have been kind of submitted for change. And today, we haven't done this for a long time. And then I looked and saw on the town's website that there was a 3-person bylaw committee and Don Davison was on it and the other 2 seats were empty. So I submitted a note of interest for it. Cindy, I got back to me and said, hey, they know they got to do something with this, but they're not going to make any appointments to the committee at this time. And I'm like, and then as we started doing this, it's like, I don't even see a bylaw committee anyplace. So was that something that was just hanging around on the website that never got taken down? Or what?
It might have been.
Okay.
I
Yeah, if you're, so you're not.
I do know that, on the boards and committees list on the website, particularly that, that boards and committees information page, there is several listed on there that no longer exist. And they've got some listed on there that were active for a while, but like a building committee, I think there's the one of the, either the police station or the center station, fire station building committee is still listed there. I mean, these are committees that are formed for a particular purpose, do their work, and then they're done.
Yeah.
And that, while it could be interesting to see that committee's records, sort of, if you want to go through and dig into past meeting minutes and so on, it might be nice to have that available through the town website, but you don't want them on the list of current committees, which, that's another angle on which I've been working on my list of boards and committees. Really what got me started on that was reviewing the town website, and just trying to gather together information about all the boards and committees. And I realized, I found there that, so, one of my aims with that is ultimately to have some recommendations for the website. But turns out that work also is going to be helpful in cleaning up the bylaws when it comes to boards and committees.
To me, I mean, I think we've obviously seen deficiencies in the process, right? Because some of these things, I think we talked about at the last meeting, a certain bylaw where town meeting vote approved something to be added to the bylaw that was completely duplicative of something that was already there, right? So there's obviously holes in the process, but I'd like to think that the belts and suspenders that are already there should be sufficient normally to catch a lot of that noise. I mean, finance committee is reviewing, everything that goes to town meeting floor. The select board has to review and approve and sign off on the warrant. And I assume, well, this is probably a broad assumption, the town council should be reviewing the language of everything that gets proposed for propriety. And really, I mean, I wouldn't want to put it on their shoulders necessarily to make sure that bylaw proposals fit in the context of the entire, the rest of the bylaws. But I would hope that between those 3 checks, a lot of that noise is getting caught. But
as it turns out,
that's not working.
That's not how it works. The select board basically accepts articles for the warrant without really delving into the substance of those. It's mostly they rely on whoever's submitting the article to submit something that should make sense. Citizen petitions are a special case because it's generally considered to be wise for town staff and government to accept a citizen's petition as is. That we don't want to be seen as interfering with a citizen's right to put something to a vote of the town. And of course, what can happen is a citizen can submit a petition for a bylaw that doesn't really make sense or is even downright illegal. Now, well, we will generally take town council's advice on, if there's a bylaw proposed that is simply not going to be legal.
Yeah.
but, so there's, there's a bit of a check and a balance in a case like that, but yeah, generally speaking, the select board doesn't review the substance of the warrant articles, particularly not for bylaw updates. The finance committee probably doesn't get too deep into the substance of those. And town council is not going to spend the time to take a proposed bylaw change and review that in the context of the existing bylaws. So there is a bit of a gap there.
It can be quite substantial. It's the same thing happens with the Attorney General's office. You think that they passed it, that it means it's all copacetic, but it really doesn't mean crap. All it means is that, can a town do this under their charter? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it really work like this? No, it can go like this, but they don't care as long as, you can.
Right. The AG review is for consistency with state law.
Yeah.
It's not for consistency with other bylaws.
They don't care if you're making a mess of your own.
Yep, they can do it.
Yeah.
Let them have fun.
Yeah. You guys can pass to a bylaw that is completely in conflict with another one of your bylaws. As long as it's okay under state law, we're not going to complain.
That's your problem.
So for all the checks and balances that are there, there is still a piece that could be considered missing from that.
We went through the fall warrant much quicker than I thought we were going to. I thought there'd be a lot more discussion, having come from FinCom review of, warrant articles, but still, I think the problem therein lies, like FinCom is not Greg and 8 other Gregs, or, like people like you, or it's so dependent upon, who's there at the time, and especially with the high turnover rate on the select board, over the last decade even. I am admittedly the weakest link in this room right now. Like I own that. I started trying to do more thorough reading of the bylaws after agreeing to come on. It is not to shoot it down, but I think a broad assumption that everybody's well versed and that everybody's necessarily looking out for those things. I think some of the attitude about judgment is, especially at like the select board level, reliant upon other people that have looked at this. Right. We're getting a top level to just go, great, move forward. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I'd like to think that there wouldn't be a need to add another level of bureaucracy to something but like I said, it obviously isn't working. So,
right.
Yeah, so it's worth following up on this thought, I think is the way I'd like to put it. It's worth following up on the thought. Probably a discussion between us, the select board, town council, the town administrator, possibly FinCom in their role as a sort of a warrant review committee. But really, the focus here is more on trying to assure some consistency and continuity in the bylaws.
Yeah.
But I'd say as well, within our purview certainly to follow up on that thought, and if in the end we conclude that the best way to accomplish this is to add to the bylaws in some way to sort of define and create a standing, we don't even know what to call it, whether it's a bylaw review committee or some other just a standing committee that is tasked with doing this.
Yeah. Well, see, part of the problem in having spent a lot of time on the finance committee over a number of different periods of time, there's been a good deal of hesitation to get into talking to people about the form and the content of the bylaws that different people have presented for anything other than financial considerations. There's a presumption, but you make a mistake when you presume that, like, if somebody came and said, hey, we want to do this, that they've kind of vetted the thing out. I almost wonder when I see some of these things, like some of the spots where you were supposed to put somebody's name and address, or an office's name and address in there or something. I can't picture that was put up on the town meeting floor with brackets in it, with somebody's name was supposed to be put in there, and we approved of it.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yes. But it's evidence that anything other than a relatively trivial change to the bylaw, something you can put in a couple sentences that anybody can kind of read and understand, but something more substantive, which is, that's how we create most of these bylaw articles. Is, the bylaw article might be several pages, and that's obviously not put up on the screen on town meeting floor. It's usually in the warrant. Occasionally, we will not even print all that language in the warrant. We'll print it in a separate document and refer to it from the warrant, which is kind of as much as it bulks up the warrant, it's better to see that language entirely printed in the warrant. But I dare say most of the people who read through the warrant, their eyes glaze over when they see something like that. And most people aren't going to read every word, especially not when it gets to the vote on town meeting floor. By then it's really too late. You have to, that stuff really has to be reviewed ahead of time. And yes, we see that in there in a few cases, and it's clear that what happened was somebody put out a model bylaw. Here's how you might write your bylaw to do this. And to customize it for your town, fill in this blank, replace this bracketed thing with whatever. And sometimes whoever is editing that thing to prepare a warrant article, they don't take the time to go through and make sure that they've taken care of everything. Other cases, they sometimes use a term for a town board or office that doesn't really apply here. But it's, other towns use that terminology, so they just include. So that, there are a lot of these kind of things that really ought to be caught. And we're going to catch all that. We're going to go through and fix that up for what's already in the bylaws. But
There's not to say you can even propose like if this committee stayed together, which I think is beneficial if everybody's still, amenable to it, because you're going to be ideally the most versed in the bylaws moving forward now that we've gone through and done the thorough revisions. But even if it was a semi-annual meetings, and you had a couple before each town meeting or something, if a new bylaw is being proposed to, review and
yeah, and because once we complete our work, our every 5-year review work, potentially at every town meeting there will be some warrant articles proposing a bylaw change. So ahead of a town meeting, whenever there is a bylaw change proposed, would be a good time to get this group or whatever group ends up doing, whatever individual group. And it's probably better as a group effort rather than relying on any one individual. But yes, that would be something that you would typically expect to meet twice a year, for town meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'd be a crazy idea to think that, this organization or this committee's, got its roots in the charter. And so that main purpose, I think, needs to stay the same. So for every 5 years, we appoint a new committee. That committee's immediate work is the review of the bylaws as they stand and what we're doing now. And you've got 1.5 years to do that. And then for the 3.5 years after that, yeah, you guys stick around and maybe we do, meet a couple times a year before town meeting. I don't think that would be a gross.
No, it kind of makes the job of the following bylaw review committee relatively easy.
Yeah.
Should, yeah.
Yep. Yes, if you have sort of regular review, and we're catching up on 20 years worth of work here, but
Yeah.
once we've done that catch-up work, if we then have this mechanism in place to review bylaw changes as they are proposed, then the next 5-year review is probably going to be no work at all.
Yeah, it's like.
You know, the only difference would be in between those 5-year reviews. You're just looking at new stuff that's being, you know, that it's stuff, changes that are being proposed. At your 5-year review, you sort of take a look back and maybe, you know, that's sort of your opportunity to say, we don't need this bylaw
Yeah.
anymore.
There could still be something that became obsolete over those
So,
5 years.
so right,
or-
there are things that, things change every 5 years. It's good to take a look back at not just what's been doing piece by piece in between, but, here's the whole body of the bylaw. Is there anything here that needs an update? So, yeah, there's kind of, there's those two roles, which are, those two jobs, which are very, rather similar, but not identical. Which, brings us back to the question of, what's the best way to organize the in-between? And whether it's the 5-year review committee gets appointed and then they sort of continue that work a couple times a year, or whether it's a separate group somehow.
Right.
We'll want to figure that out, but we don't need to figure it out tonight. But I think seems like we're all kind of in agreement that there's sort of the general approach here that we think would be helpful.
Even just, maintaining that schedule and sticking to what we're supposed to be doing, obviously makes things easier, but should cut down on some of that possibly duplicative language or, conflicting submissions, anything like that, reviewing them regularly as outlined, as opposed to every, decade, 15 years.
We had a couple of these goofy articles that kind of figure copy and paste ones. We should be reaching out to whomever seems to be in charge though and saying, by the way, who's supposed to go in here? Or what's supposed to go in here? Just to knock off a couple of things, because the people that put those together should have kind of had an idea.
Yes. Yeah, and
Which ones?
It was so well, what do we got? There's 218 lines on the spreadsheet now, Andy, but there were a couple of the bylaws that I thought, and that's why I was just looking through, because they had jumped out at me when I was looking at it before. But there are a couple of places where there are brackets, and it was kind of like insert somebody's name or a department's name here. I think was one in the CPC and one in the plastic bag bylaw, and I thought there was a third one that had something in it.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, certainly as we go through, and if we're going to be picking off particular articles to work on, when we work on, whoever works in, or when we work on an article that has that, we'll certainly, we'll to resolve that, we'll want to reach out to, whoever is responsible for that. But yes, so kind of getting back to Brian's list here of articles where we've received all the feedback we expect to. Article 2 on town meetings as an example. Does somebody want to take on the comments we've had on town meetings and work on it?
I can take that.
All right, Greg will take that one. Article 7, town clerk is ready for someone to work on. I don't remember off the top of my head what the comments were on it.
Well,
I think there wasn't much.
Town clerk, this home supposed to be the town clerk's representative.
Ah, this is true.
I actually read through town meeting. I think I went through the first 12 or 15 articles in order, and then went back to just what you required of the select board at the time and said, I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But in reading through the town meeting one, there was an adjustment to section 15 in 2016 that we left the pronouns all masculine. But there was one in section 18 from 99, and they had done he or she throughout. I was like, wow, that was.
We talked about that the last time.
Yeah.
It seems like somebody, kind of like when you get different things programmed in computer language that you would think people did the same way.
Yeah.
Somebody takes an entirely different approach, but kind of comes out with something. So there's some of them you'd swear that people from Mars and people from Venus and some other place were writing them. And it's like, how do we come up with this different lingo? So I gotta go in and try and.
How do we get it right in 99, but not in 2016? You know?
Well,
Yeah,
make
I
any
did-
political statement. Well, nothing failed.
Did notice under town clerk that the section 6 that got moved under the office hours has been mostly fixed in the most recent update. So it is now almost in the right place. Where content of section 6 was above section 3. So content of section 6 is now above its title a little bit, but otherwise it's mostly correct. So they're about the only real question we have for Article 7 is the ballot list for town meeting, which depends on whether or not they're needed for paper ballots. And I imagine that in case of failures, there always will be needed. In case of failures of the voting system.
right. It will always be possible to have to take a paper ballot vote at town meeting.
Yeah.
If, the failure of the electronic system is one possible reason for that. Holding a town meeting outdoors where we don't have the electronic system
Yeah.
available. A voter at town meeting with the support of 21, I think it is, with the support of 20 others, can request a paper ballot, even though the electronic system is there to count. It's still, we have to be prepared to do paper ballots at town meeting.
Do we know where that requirement comes from?
I think it's the charter, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's gonna turn into a brutal thing is. Well, anyways, so another thing that I had in there was in section 4, it's got Article 2, section 18, it should be 16.
Yeah, and Dave, the situation you were just describing should be the only time when we would need the paper ballots, because in the other instances, if we're not using the electronic system, then we've essentially gone to the hand votes, whether
Yes.
paddles, with or without paddles. And so to me, unless someday we have a moderator who feels differently, I think we would only ever end up in the situation where we're using paper ballots is if we've got the 21 people that demand it.
So there's
So-
216 is the one that says it's the 21 voters, and the question I've had is, does the electronic voting negate the need for written or printed ballots when the electronic voting systems are in use? So
It would have to-
would we be able to amend this to say that only applies, or that doesn't apply if the electronic voting systems are being used? Or if there are state laws or other things that would
Yeah.
get right.
Right, we will probably want to check state law,
Yeah,
because if state law requires us to give the option of paper ballots, we can't really negate that.
Yeah. but we could say, we could modify this section of the bylaws to say unless otherwise required by state law or anything like that, but that is something we should look into. At least that was something on my list.
Yeah.
Dave, only because I know you literally wrote the manual. Does the electronic voting system keep a record? So I know in the background, Williams, kind of setting and resetting things in between votes and things. Does the system keep a record of each of those votes above and beyond, the moderator announcing it at town meeting,
Yes,
it keeps a record.
right. The electronic voting system has the software there will keep a record of how every clicker voted on every vote.
Is that retained?
That's,
Yeah, the system-
hopefully that's retained with the minutes of each meeting.
Right, the system it captures all that in a file, so it is,
So the total count should be recorded in the minutes, but not the individual vote.
now the fact, I mean, obviously the
It's
system.
equivalent to a paper ballot in a municipal.
Right, and that's what I was getting at. If it's kept at that level of detail, to me, I think, and again, unless there's something, in the state law that actually requires paper. Seems like we would have everything in the electronic system that a
Yes.
paper ballot would be intended to get you.
Right. Yeah. The reason people request a paper ballot is primarily for the purpose of voting in secret. So that nobody sees whose
Right.
hands is raised, yes and no. And that objective is accomplished with the electronic voting system. Arguably, the electronic voting system defeats the purpose of an open town meeting generally, where it is expected that normally you see how your fellow voters vote. And you don't see that with the electronic voting system at all. And I've, a couple people have mentioned to me that they like the old way where everybody raises their hands or stands up to vote, precisely because you get to see how everybody voted. And you don't get that with the electronic voting system.
On the other hand, there are cons to that. It's you get
Exactly.
to see how other people are voting, so you may vote a particular way
Yes,
because someone else can
Right.
see you voting.
your vote can be influenced by whether or not someone else knows how you voted.
Yes.
And so we kind of sidestep all that as the one thing that we cannot do is take that record in the electronic system and tell you how any
One person.
individual voted,
No,
because
yeah.
we do not record who
Who
got
gets
which
what,
clicker. We actually used to do that.
All right.
When we first started using the system, when you checked in to vote, they looked you up on a paper printout, and they would write down the clicker number that they gave you. The reason for doing that was, if you didn't turn your clicker in, they know who to go. If clicker number 39 didn't get turned in, we know who got clicker 39, and we can go after them. We stopped doing that.
Clicker police app.
Because in practice, to my knowledge, we've, in the years, we first used the clickers in 2016.
Yep.
And actually, that was with the rented system or a loaner system. So I think 2017 was when we bought our clickers. But in all the time, the 5 years that we've had the clicker system, we've lost exactly one out of 672 clickers.
And Dave took it home as a souvenir.
Yeah. He still does, it's on his mantle at home. That's why Susan kept on not working at the last meeting.
Yeah, we had a whole box full of clickers that weren't working. They had dead batteries. I thought Evan and William had gone through and replaced
They said they had.
all the clicker batteries.
Maybe they managed to miss that one somehow.
They, since it was exactly one box that was almost completely dead.
Yeah.
It's likely that one box got missed.
I know that they were-
And maybe another box of clickers had its batteries replaced twice. I don't know.
They were explicit in the select board meetings and whatever, about having replaced them before Springtown meeting. So that was the first time we had used them in, since pre-pandemic. I didn't remember hearing as explicit a reference before Fall Town meeting that they had all been replaced again, but.
Right, they shouldn't have been, because you can expect those batteries based on the testing I had done a while back. After that year when the clickers just weren't working for us. But my best guess is you can expect the clicker batteries to be good for 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And then we went for a couple of years without using the clickers. So the batteries a lot of the batteries probably were dying through that couple of years. That's why at the first town meeting when we got back to using the clickers after the pandemic, that we wanted to make sure that we replaced all the batteries.
Stupid things cost.
I have no idea what we paid for that clicker system.
No, I really. How many ballot votes do you recall prior to that? Probably 2 or 3. At the most, in
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Generally, the override, like the building the middle school, building the high school. or
Yeah,
building the
they're,
elementary.
over the course of 30 some years. I mean, I've been going to town meetings since 1986. So that's about 30 years before we brought the clickers in. And maybe a half a dozen ballot votes over all that time, not very many.
I wonder if it was really worthwhile even buying them. Or renting them, or how much it costs to get all the batteries for them.
Well, the batteries are relatively cheap. Like $4 for $1 or something like that, I don't remember, but. The batteries are cheap, but. It's sort of nice to, to have an actual vote count for every vote. It's only really necessary if you've got a 2/3 or a 3/5 or a 9/10 requirement. And the clicker system does make it easy to do that. Skip, you remember walking up and down the aisles a lot to,
Count
count the
votes.
standing vote.
Yep.
On the other hand, running the clickers for every vote, when most of the votes are a show of hands and it's just, you can see right away which way the vote's gone.
It's fast.
That's-
Raise your hand.
that's-
It is to click the
That's
clicker.
faster than using the clicker system. It's possible that if I were moderating the meeting, I might take a hand vote, and if it's not obvious, then take a clicker vote. Then your clicker system has an incomplete record of votes, but who cares?
Yeah, because if it's just a simple majority. How many years do we have of simple majorities, and was there ever a problem with that?
No, I think it was Tim who had the bright idea of bringing the clicker system in. I wasn't involved with it at the time. I got involved mainly when we started having trouble with the clickers. All right. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's kind of off topic here. So let's see, where were we at?
The next couple, 11 and 14, inspector of wires and gas piping and appliances. I think updates should be fairly minor, and I'll grab both of those.
Yeah, 14 is a single typo.
Yeah,
And just to throw it, we didn't have any requested changes on the council on aging.
right, so that's
17,
done. We're already done with that one,
Yeah,
unless someone else comes up with something.
yeah, I'll take another quick read through, but I don't think we have anything.
Yeah, with that one, yeah, we can, anything that'd be lovely if we could check off a few that said we don't have to touch these. And we talked about deferring work on Silver Lake until we're ready to work on Lake Ripple and Silver Lake together.
Yeah, I would like to take a shot at combining those. Once we have some.
Yeah,
select board
the only
feedback.
thing that popped in my mind when, as soon as I said that, was the comments Dave had made in the past about, not wanting to move around or eliminate articles or sections that other documents might reference. And so that could gum up the works if we wanted to truly combine them into, say, a single article or.
Yeah, it would just say, we would have say this article was repealed at this town meeting, see Article 22.
Yes, if we literally combined those two lakes into a single article, the other one would be a placeholder,
Yep.
it would just be. If, for example, we merge them both into Article 22.
Yep.
Then Article 29 on Lake Ripple would just say refer to Article 22, something. So that would, if it made sense to combine them into a single article on that basically covers both lakes.
Yeah, and I was looking at it, and I think there are two sections that are different between the two, and most of it has to do with motors and speed.
Yeah, so yeah, that's worth looking at, and yeah, we don't want to, as I said before in the previous meeting, I don't know that it's advisable to renumber the articles.
Right.
But yes, this is an example of how you could combine the articles and, while retaining the numbering. I just, if we simply, that's not this case, but if we were to say, identify an article that simply doesn't need to be there anymore, you could just, you'd leave the article heading in there and just say this. Was
Eliminated at
repealed.
town meeting.
Yeah. This article is repealed. I've in reading through state law on occasion, I'll run into a Mass General Laws, chapter such and such, section such. This was repealed by, and that's all you need to say, but that's all you would need to do to preserve numbering in a case like that. Article 25, the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. There is, I think the Conservation Commission did not request any changes, but the committee has identified a
lot of cleanup.
some cleanup, which by and large I think is not substantive. It just, in fact, I think if no one else wants to volunteer to take Article 25, I'll work on that. I could argue that once upon a time I was on the Conservation Commission, so I should know something about this. I think I was on Concom around the time that we created this Wetlands Protection Bylaw. So I'll do that.
The next couple, and David, I know you mentioned inviting the fire chief, and I think he might have been teed up to come to our last meeting. I don't know if you've had any other conversations with him.
Other than, letting him know that he's welcome to come and meet with us at his convenience. I think in this, that article is probably pending any feedback from the fire chief.
Yeah, because I think we could obviously have somebody, and I'd be happy to do it, run through the couple minor changes that he had in each of the next two, 28A and 31. And then we'll probably just need to have him come in to speak to the lockbox bylaw that he proposed. We take up.
Sounds like a plan.
And the only thing on 28A, I think the last meeting we had toyed with the idea of whether we should leave that standing alone or.
I think we should just delete it. It's redundant with Mass General Law. It is inconsistent with Mass General Law. So I would like to write up just motion to just repeal it as outdated and unnecessary. I would take that one.
Yep, I would. It's possible that we would need to sort of contemplate that together with the personnel bylaw, which covers most of the personnel issues. And my conversation with Evan about the personnel bylaw was he was intending to work on, he sees that sort of needs a major rewrite, review. And he indicated that he was going to be working on that with Mark Terry, our labor council. But it should touch base with them and find out what his plans are to work on that. But it's unless that work identifies a need for that fire department bylaw to stay there, we could delete.
From what I've seen, there is a state requirement that firefighters retire at the end of the month in which they turn 65. Whereas our bylaw says you must retire when you turn 65. So they're inconsistent with each other and unnecessary inconsistency, which can cause problems.
Yes, if state law does the job that the bylaw was intended to do, there's no reason to have a bylaw. So, and unless the review of the personnel bylaws generally identifies a need to retain that fire department bylaw, we would, our recommendation would be to delete it. So, yeah, fire department
There's
and open
power
burning.
outage, self-crafted.
And what did we have on community preservation?
So
Did we do open burning?
Massachusetts law does require that you retire at a certain time, but towns can petition the state to make changes to that.
Yeah.
At different times.
Okay, so open burning, we wanted to,
I can take it on.
yeah, and so we keep that in mind with our future discussion of the fire chief.
Yeah.
Community preservation.
The other thing with the open burning bylaw. Make sure that he considers a change in the people that are authorized to issue tickets. Because I would imagine a fair number of the tickets that have been issued over time have not been in compliance with our bylaw, because it says the chief or police officers, not assistant chiefs or anybody else.
So 36 is no comments, so I think that's done. We just need 34.
And what were we doing? 34, that was a
CPC.
CPC,
Yes.
and the things we itemized on that were,
Chapters to sections, remove initial appointment terms,
yeah,
the chapter 6 transitional position, which provision, which I think is
Right.
the same thing.
yeah, that's just, that's essentially some cosmetic and things that are no longer needed. CPC didn't request any feedback.
Right.
Well, I can take that one, I guess. And we can talk more with the chief about a lockbox file, I suppose. The noise bylaw, we've got a couple of. That's going to take, that's going to be an interesting one to try to figure out.
One,
Noise bylaw,
oh,
a future noise bylaw.
that. There are provisions in state laws for that to be addressed elsewhere. And whether it gets addressed there or doesn't get addressed there should be where it stays, instead of us
Yeah.
creating a whole nother thing.
Right, that's similar to my thinking that if there is existing state law that adequately addresses the perceived problems of noise, I mean, the police chief requesting this suggests that, he at least sees the need for it. And I don't know if there really is, even if we think it would be nice to have a noise bylaw, there's a question about whether we can create a noise bylaw that is workable. I remember at some point when the topic came up, I don't remember in what context it came up, I did a little bit of looking into state law. There's a state law related to pollution that includes noise pollution. And it has some ostensibly objective measures of noise and, thresholds above which it can be considered noise pollution. And part of the problem I had with thinking about implementing a noise bylaw is never mind whether the topic is already adequately covered by state law. It's by and large, the perception of objectionable noise it's very subjective. And if you have a noise bylaw, there is a risk of selective enforcement. And there's a risk of it not being consistently enforced. There's the problem of, what does it take to enforce a noise bylaw realistically? How do you measure the noise? Where and when do you measure the noise? And so there are a lot of practical issues I would worry about. Given the suggestions to have a noise bylaw, at some point we will want to do some investigation. We want to find out what currently exists in state law. We can look at what other towns have. Not that necessarily they'll have a workable noise bylaw. It's I suppose it's nice to say you have one on the books, but is it really going to be effective? We have, and we've identified I think it's not in this list of things ready to look at, but somewhere in our bylaw, we do have something about construction noise.
Right.
Connected with construction hours, but construction noise, and we have a measurement specified in that bylaw, which is useless because it doesn't say anything about where do you measure that.
Right.
You measure that right next to that loud piece of the construction equipment. Of course, it's going to exceed that level. Do you measure it at the property boundary? Do you measure it at abutting residences? That's an ineffective bylaw because it's not something, it doesn't spell out some criteria by which you can measure and test for compliance. And that's on our list of things to work on.
Yeah.
And in fact, when we consider a general noise bylaw, the construction noise bylaw that we already have should be considered in that context as well. So I would sort of tie those together.
So this is a Board of Health thing. And Spencer's got a bylaw on the books for it. I don't think that they want to tackle this. Who are we? Because there's a lot of stuff that
Board of Health is a enforcement.
Well, there's already state laws about this.
Yeah.
And the state won't do anything with their law about it. I'm sure that the people that had a problem with the shanty in Olden Farms, they called the state would just say, ha ha ha, have a nice day.
Yeah.
And pass the buck. And if like Spencer says, oh, you have a noise problem, the town has to go out and hire sound engineers to do stuff. It's gonna, like you said, you're gonna just, I can see it like at the Mona Lisa Vito moment. When was your sound instrument calibrated? It's kind of like the radar. Oh, well, it could have been off. So who knows whether it was actually 100 decibels or it could have been 99 and within your,
So what we will probably end up doing is doing some investigation, some research, gathering information about the practical aspects of a noise bylaw. And what you just mentioned, Skip, about Spencer. Yeah, I think that's right on point. What we will probably end up doing is explaining, maybe at some length, we got these requests for a noise bylaw. We gave it serious consideration. And here's why we've chosen not to do that. Ultimately, because we don't think it can work. But people will be probably, for those who don't like noise, they'll probably be maybe reluctantly satisfied to know that we took the idea seriously. And we came to the conclusion that there's really nothing effective we could do.
It would be to put restrictions on permits. Because you can do that. So if you put a entertainment license out, you say, okay, if the noise level from that cannot exceed 100 decibels measured at a point at the street boundary of the particular location. Then you give somebody the street meter and you walk down the street and say, well, it's only 75, so have a nice day. And I'm not
Yep.
gonna come back 400 times during the night.
Well, so that's, I think, the thing, if I'm remembering properly, and there was a ZBA meeting only in September, that, the Richlicks initiated for the sunflower shanty complaints, and if I remember properly, it was the, what you just said, the noise,
Decibels?
no,
Measuring
not,
device?
no,
Meter.
The noise pollution,
pollution, thank you,
Thank
yes, that the
Yeah.
state, that we approached that via the state regulation or statute for noise pollution, and that was 10 decibels above the ambient level measured at the property line. And that was how they came to that, and the town bought a calibrated, decibel meter, like a professional grade one, so that they could do specifically that, and that was how it ended up. I mean, they determined that the licensing was the issue, ultimately, not the sound, but Bob Berger went up, took ambient readings a couple times over a couple days in that area at the property lines, and then went back when bands were playing and did the same, so we could, map the difference. And as luck would have it for the shanty, they were all under 10 decibels. So, I mean, 10 decibel increase.
Yeah.
But-
that's an interesting story. Because that shows that we did go out and do an evaluation based on the state standards.
And I believe Bob conferred with town council as well to, figure out the best course of approach there.
Yeah.
And that was some of the delay and why enforcement hadn't been done, because they were working through that.
And so given the existence of the state noise pollution standards, and given an example that we actually tried to apply those.
I would see no need to
Right.
do anything else.
What could we usefully do with our own noise bylaw beyond that?
Just be more restrictive.
We could be more restrictive. That could bring about other problems.
Right, is to be more restrictive, you'd have to have a reason to be
Right.
more restrictive.
Right.
Not just, well, we don't like the state standard and.
Yeah.
So we want to put it at 5.
Yeah, we could review the state standard too, to make sure that there aren't any holes in enforcement. So this is if they get into who is the enforcement party, so it sounds like we landed on the inspector of buildings as our local enforcement agent. Is that appropriate? Do we need to codify that someplace? Who owns this?
Yeah, it goes back to one of my philosophies is I don't want to reinvent a wheel if I've got a good enough wheel.
Yep.
Yeah, and in this case here, if the wheel we have available to us works well enough, we really don't need to reinvent that wheel. Yeah, I'm just generally not in favor of.
I mean, yeah, I thought it would be you and I had talked about it in the past. I thought it would be a much bigger issue. And maybe it just kind of shifts perennially, but we went through a stretch where Reunion was getting a bunch of noise complaints. And then they died down. And then,
Yep.
we got some from Sunflower Shanty, but it primarily just seemed to be the neighbors across the street. I would expect it'll come up again once movement happens with the warehousing in Lemon Gordon. That'll be like the next big opportunity, but they all they seem to work themselves out, I guess would be the point, whether through enforcement or suggestion, whatever the case.
Yep, circumstances change. People get used to things that they initially find objectionable.
Well, you know, if you grew up next to a railroad, it doesn't keep you awake all night.
Yeah.
Oh, we lived over on Westboro Road next to the, I don't even know what it is anymore, but, in the front of the apartment building over there, never heard the, you know, after the first couple of weeks of living there, never heard the trains going by anymore.
We had a place close to the train tracks in Holden. It was the same thing. You felt it, like, and we were close
Yeah.
enough that, you know, there was some vibration in the floor and the walls, but you just,
Yeah, it just kind of goes away. You know, you can have different things happen over there, although the shanty might be a little bit different. I was thinking of, yeah, okay, so in the spring they can fetch about it, but in the summer, when the leaves all grow on the trees, you can't hear it anymore,
well,
you know?
not to totally tangent, but, and again, I went up there over the late summer and had a conversation with Trevor. And I had an epiphany just standing there, because they had installed the sound blanketing around the tent at that point, and, you know, I'm going, why can I still hear it so clearly on the other side of the field? The sunflowers are up, you know, there should be no reason the people across the street are getting this.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me looking at it that they have the stage, or, you know, entertaining area turned just slightly, and it points directly at their beer garden across the way, which is just a flat front metal shipping container.
Yeah,
It just,
oh, yeah.
it just throws it back across the street. So I suggested as much of that, like, drag that thing over here and leave that an open shot to the field. And it goes that way, you don't get any more complaints. You know, beyond operating business that you may or may not should be operating at this point, but the sound complaint goes away.
Yeah, and that's. So, from that perspective, right? If you're going to do anything, it would probably be best to do it through the Board of Health's ability to regulate that stuff.
Yes,
It's easier. They can do it on their own. We don't even have to go through bylaw, but anyways. I digress.
yep. Now this, you know, this, particularly with the issues that we've heard all summer. Oh, we gotta have a noise bylaw. Well,
Well,
Yeah,
we've had
yeah,
exactly zero members of the public, you know, show up to
Even talk about
shut
this.
that point down, so, or to propose it. So.
no, yeah, well, well, I mean, you know, like I said, I think it's worthwhile for us to, you know, sort of gather up some information. And sort of, you know, reevaluate and understand that, you know, in all likelihood, the existing noise pollution regulations are up to the job. If we do anything at all, and I don't even know if we, you know, like you said, Skip, I don't know if we need to do anything in the bylaw. The Board of Health may want to take on that. If the Board of Health has a role or should have a role, do they want to do they want to take it? Even though we might think it's a good idea for them to take it on, do they want to? Does the police chief want to take on that job? And
I doubt it.
and that depends in part upon this, you know, what the state law says and doesn't say about
Yeah.
how it gets
Who's
enforced.
supposed to take care of it?
So we don't have all the answers right now, but
I'm happy to look into it, certainly not to say that, you know, anybody else shouldn't, but I'm happy to, you know, pull together some information, and I think at the end of the day, we may end up needing to have a meeting, you know, invite in the police chief, and the planning board was the other entity that suggested we do something on noise to kind of workshop. Hey, listen, this is what we're finding on our own. Do you have any other thoughts, anything that we're missing, and help put it to bed that way?
yes, I know, given the level of interest that there is in the noise bylaw. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get together with everybody who's interested in talking about it. And collectively, we can work out what, if anything, we should do in the bylaw.
Yeah, and if signs are pointing to the Board of Health, you know, loop them in, but yeah, I'm happy to do some work there.
Yep. So that's something we can, you know, we can work on that over time. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's not something we need to get done next week.
Yeah.
There's nothing we need to get done next week.
Well, yes, there is. Turkey.
Well, yeah, nothing
Bylaw related.
bylaw related that we, unless we want to pass a turkey bylaw. We have a chicken.
Does Grafton have a town bird?
I don't think so.
Or should be the turkey number that I see in Grafton.
We have plenty of turkeys wandering around the town.
I wasn't gonna say a word.
Feathered and
And
otherwise.
I'm referring specifically to the turkey, the feathered variety of turkeys. No comment on other kinds of turkeys that we might I think about.
Meetings are more fun when they're not recording.
Well, I don't know how well it's paying, but Zoom is actually recording this. But we have nobody in attendance. We had one attendee for a while, but they didn't stay on for too long. Too boring. All right, anything else we want to do tonight as far as taking on some work?
No, I think the only other point that I wanted to make, I know I'd mentioned it a while back, but now that the action item list is in a fairly decent spot. My plan for some of the more administrative clerical type things is to start maintaining a track changes version of the latest Word doc. In Andy, you probably weren't on the listserv the last time that got circulated. I'll send you. Candy sent a Word version of the bylaws, which could be helpful for us to track changes, mark things up as we're going through bylaws and things like that. So I'll send you a copy of that. But yeah, so I'll keep a track changes version that starts ticking off some of those more clerical type things. And then once we get that to a point that it's either fairly complete or either complete enough to review in detail, we can circulate it, make sure that we're all on the same page, that, the things that are marked up are purely clerical. And possibly at some point forward that along to town council, make sure she's on board, and figure out how, what the disposition for those types of things will be. But that's just another side project.
Yeah, no, I know we've talked about that often. How do we accumulate the cosmetic changes, the editorial non-substantive changes?
Yeah, just have something out there for any of us to put in. What we may or may not be doing.
Yeah.
All righty, so our next regularly scheduled meeting would be, where's my December calendar? Second Thursday of December, that would be December 8th.
Think. Andy, is that when the select board just set their goals meeting?
No.
They won't, on Thursday, would they?
Yeah, we're doing that. We're doing the 29th.
Oh, okay.
So we would normally have meetings, if we follow our second and fourth Thursday schedule, December 8th and December 22nd.
Oh, whoa.
Worked out. I have no other committees on Thursdays.
Yeah, it was a bit of a struggle for us to arrive at a day that we could all make meetings, because some of us have,
You want to do the 1st and the 15th? Instead,
yeah, the first is 2 weeks from tonight,
and the 15th.
and the 15th, yeah, that gets us done with December meetings a little bit earlier before the holidays. And I'm good with that if everybody else is.
My calendar looks clear.
All right, so we'll plan on the 1st and the 15th. And with that, we have one remaining agenda item, which is to approve the previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Was that just for the meeting on the 9th that you guys had?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a highly dedicated, trained and compensated clerk.
Doing well.
Who's right on top of this stuff.
Yes. All right, so moved and seconded that the minutes of November 9th be approved as drafted. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Declare motion carried unanimously. And with that, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously.